What's up, everybody? I am your host, a strong, independent woman who enjoys writing novels, relaxing by the lake, and brutally murdering men who did me wrong. And that is my co host, another strong, independent woman who can hold her breath for a ridiculous amount of time. And welcome to the Grindhouse Syndicate Remake versus Original, where today we are putting a 1970s low-budget grindhouse revenge film against its much newer and shinier remake that, despite its glossy cover, still packs a serious punch. Because today we are talking about I Spit on Your Grave, 1978 versus 2010, which has been requested by many people over the years. And we figure, hey, why not talk about them both at the same time and also figure out which one of these brutal revenge stories is better than the other? And you know what? We have a pretty good chance at getting our first remake win on versus a remake versus original. This
Yeah.
this could this could happen.
Yeah, I'm super excited for this one for multiple reasons. One that you just mentioned.
Yeah,
This was one that I said had potential. I believe it was the remake that you were not familiar with,
never seen it.
and I have seen them both. The remake a lot more recent, but the original quite a while ago. And I remember seeing the remake and being impressed with some parts of it, and I was like, "Okay, if you haven't seen," I knew kinda your rough thoughts on what the original was, you hadn't seen the remake. I know what I liked about the remake, so I thought this one might have a possible chance,
Might.
but I also have to re-dive into the original because 'cause it's been a while since I've seen it, and, I will say I hate doing this. We never do it on this show, and we're never the people that ask for likes and
Like and subscribe.
comments and subscribe. I fucking it's like super cringy. I know people have to do it for the algorithms, but if there is an episode that you are going to comment or like or subscribe for, please do it for this one because the algorithm is going to stick its unlubed dick right up this episode's ass.
Yeah, it's gonna have a lot of words that are gonna trigger the algorithm to be like, nope, let's just tuck that in this little corner. But I am very curious what these scores are gonna be at the end of this episode. Um, yeah, I had seen the original, but I had never seen I knew the remake existed, but I had never seen it. And then a lot of you already know like this about me, but I'm not personally a fan of movies with a lot of sexual violence. It's just not for me. Kind of stirs up a bunch of emotion, and I don't leave the film enjoying it. I leave the film angry and depressed.
Well, see, and I'm kind of the opposite of that. It's not that I overly enjoy these movies more than other movies, but I really enjoy any movie that makes you feel raw emotion, that makes you forget that something is a movie. And even if that is uncomfortability and like shit that makes your skin crawl, that is a talented director, in my opinion, that can make you feel legitimate feelings on something that is not real.
Well, I'll be honest, like I did not enjoy watching these two movies back to back this week, but I did not let that mess with my scores. I kept it very fair. But there's a first time watch for me when it comes to the remake. And honestly, I think both films have their flaws as well as their shining moments. So I'm really on the edge of my seat wondering which way this is going to go. Not to mention, I have no fucking clue what your opinion on either one of these movies is. I don't think we've ever talked about these movies.
Yeah, that's another thing is like I don't know. I didn't even know where my scores were gonna stand, and I obviously had no clue what your take on the remake was gonna be. I'm really interested to hear your take on that. But this movie, I could see how you skimmed over this remake. because this came out in 2010,
Yep.
which was right at the, like,
Peak of remake.
mecca.
Yeah.
Yeah, the mecca of all the shitty remakes that a lot of them were literally the
Copy
same
paste.
shiny, super clean looking, CGI heavy, just shitty movies. And this one, I could see how they would slip through the cracks, but I think this one kinda did its own thing. It paid respect to the original, but it's also a much different movie.
Well, with that being said, let's head into the Horror Thunderdome where two movies enter and only one walks out. So here's how the game works. We are taking these two films and putting them head to head in six very important categories where we will each individually award them points. And at the very end, we will add them up and answer the age old question: is the remake better than the original? So the categories are: 1, tone and atmosphere; 2, characters and performances; 3, direction and style; 4, impact on the horror genre; 5, effects and kills; and 6 is a bonus category that we get to pick that's kind of individually tailored for that set of movies. And after some discussion, we decided the only thing that's not already covered in all of the other categories that is also a major part of both films is the impact of the sexual assault scenes. So, with that being said, let's head into the arena and put these two head to head.
Let's do it.
Hello, boys and ghouls. If you want to stay up to date on what's going on with the show, talk about or submit your movie requests, or just say die, then I got good news for you. You can always find us at one of our social media accounts or our official website at grindhousehorrorpod.com, Facecrook at the Grindhouse Syndicate Horror Podcast, Instascam at grindhousesyndicate.horror.pod, and many gore, which you can always find links for in the show notes as always. And you know what I always say, the morgue, the merrier. So please subscribe or follow for alerts on new episodes. Now, back to the show, kiddies. Frights, camera, action.
All right, per usual, we are going to give a brief history lesson on both films. We will start with the original. So ratings: IMDb a 5.7 out of 10, Rotten Tom 51%, Letterboxd a 2.8 out of 5. All right, let's dive into the history, the production. I Spit on Your Grave, which was originally titled Day of the Woman, was written and directed by Meir Zarchi. It stars Camille Keaton, Iran Tabor, and Richard Price. The film follows the story of Jennifer Hills, a fiction writer based in New York City who exacts revenge on her 4 tormentors who gang rape her and leave her for dead. It was produced by Cinemagic Pictures and Joseph Zebda. It was released on November 22nd of 1978, had a budget of $80,000, and no reported box office. And when I first dove into this movie at the beginning of this week, I was like, oh, I have a feeling that this is one of those movies where all the money it made went directly to loan sharks and credit cards and some old boxes under the bed, not a fucking expense report or receipt in sight. They don't know how much money that this thing made. So Israeli-American filmmaker Meir Zarchi and his friend decided to take a stroll through the park one day in October of 1974. And right as they turn the corner, they come across a severely traumatized rape victim stumbling through an area called Jamaica Hills. Thankfully, him and his friend acted fast, quickly running over to help the poor girl and immediately took her to the police station to report the crime. And not only was Zarchi stunned by the fact that a group of men could attack and rape a woman like that, but also the fact that it took place in the middle of the day at a New York City public park. But the other thing that really bothered him was how the police treated the injured woman. totally acting unsympathetic and bombarding her with insensitive, dismissive questions. Now, I have read like a slightly different version of the story where apparently it was him, his friend, and his daughter. They were driving by the park and they spotted the girl that like she was naked and bloody and she's crawling out of the bushes. I'm not 100% sure which one or the exact details. I got both stories from third parties, but the main points are all the same. He essentially comes across this girl, and then the police drop the ball, and this upsets him. So this left Zarhi outraged, where he then decided to channel those feelings into a screenplay, which would be a darker exploration of a woman pushed to the absolute edge. And after the authorities failed to do anything about it, she's forced to take justice into her own hands. So once he has this idea, he gets invited to stay the weekend at his friend's summer house located in Kent, Connecticut, which is right on the edge of the Housatonic River. And this ends up being the final piece of the story for Zarhi, because when he gets there, he realizes this is where the story should take place. Fun fact, this is also where the movie would eventually be filmed, including the exact house you see in the film.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, we don't get that very much these days.
No. So now that he has all the main details, he starts writing his screenplay, which he mostly does during his subway route to and from his job in Times Square. And he does this by hand for 4 months. And his wife would then type out the pages every day on a typewriter in order to make it easier to read, which that very typewriter can be seen in the film. So once the screenplay was written, he realized because he isn't a Hollywood writer or director, there's no way he's going to be able to get this thing financed by a studio, especially considering the violence depicted in the story, which leads him with no other choice than to personally finance the film with his own life savings, which was about $80,000. And because this budget was super tight, this meant that he had no money for stunt actors, meaning the actors he hired would have to be willing to do their own stunts, as well as him being forced to hire some of his own family to be in the film, which led me to stumble across this funny little fact. He ended up paying his 2 young children a whopping $10 each for their very minor roles.
Yeah, very, very minor. Holy shit.
Yeah, barely in the movie, but he did pay them. I don't know if he paid them because it's a law.
Yeah, it must have been.
Yeah.
Just, gonna use your allowance for the week.
Yeah. So now that the money is in place, he begins his hunt for his cast, where he quickly placed casting calls for the film in the Backstage magazine, announcing he was looking for 1 woman and 4 men in their 20s for a low-budget production. And it turns out he ended up with no shortage when it came to the 5 roles, because according to him, he received about 4,000 headshots and resumes for the parts, and at least 600 women wanted to audition for the role of Jennifer Hill. And after a ton of auditions, he eventually chooses actress Camille Keaton, who was around 30 years old at the time and already had a career starring in several other Italian horror films throughout the early 1970s. So, filming took place in Kent, Connecticut between July 27th and August of 1977, where the production encountered a few bumps in the road. One was when a male crew member quit during the filming of the second rape scene, claiming he just couldn't stomach any more of the violence. And 2 was when the film's makeup artist also quit about halfway through the production because apparently she had been gang raped in the past and just couldn't bear reliving the horrors of the attacks, which I don't think anybody would blame her for that.
No, definitely not.
So another thing I found interesting was Zarhi made all 4 male actors get naked in order to remove any awkwardness or embarrassment on the set and make actress Camille Keaton feel a little bit better about the situation, considering she spends a lot of the movie completely nude. And speaking of that, Zarhi himself even got naked when he needed to show her how he wanted her to do a specific scene. Yeah.
Yeah, that is a good director.
She would tell him, like, "No, no, 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 like, just keep your underwear on, you don't have to get completely naked."
Maybe he was a nudist.
Yeah,
Sound like he really liked
a
nakedness.
lot of naked wieners on this set.
I will say, for what this movie is about and what it covers, the main lead female actress, if there's anything you can possibly do to make them comfortable, do it because we have heard past
Yeah,
movies where that wasn't the
yeah,
case, Last House on the Left being one
yeah.
of them.
Yeah, so by all accounts, it seems that all the actors and crew behaved very respectfully, totally took this seriously, and Camille Keaton had zero complaints about Zarhi or any of her co-stars, even to the point where she would spend like the next 40 years trying to get him to do a sequel to the film so she could reprise her role as Jennifer Hills.
Damn.
So it sounds like it was a production wise, despite the content and all the nudity, everybody gelled really good. It was a good experience on set. So, once shooting wrapped up, Meir Zarchi quickly discovered financing the film was only half the battle. With him now facing severe financial devastation, he had to figure out how to actually get the movie in front of audiences. So he quickly tried to find a domestic distributor, but when that failed, he then decided he was going to try to distribute the movie under the title Day of the Woman, which led to a very lackluster drive-in theater run, which failed to generate any traction and pushed him even closer to bankruptcy. And right as he was about to throw in the towel, almost completely draining all of his personal resources, the Jerry Gross organization agreed to distribute and re-release the film in 1980 under one condition. They could change the title to anything they wanted, where it was then changed to I Spit on Your Grave, which I personally think is a way better name.
Yeah,
I think Day of the Woman's just
I
a
I
bad
agree.
name.
Yeah, I see a lot of, like, posters, AKA Day of the Woman, and I hate it.
It doesn't
Hate
it
it.
doesn't like when I read that title, it doesn't tell me I don't get any kind of vibe that it's a horror movie at all.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, it does in the sense that it sounds too much like Day of the Dead to me, which is a horror movie, but it I get what you're saying. It could be, any type
It could
of,
be a
like.
comedy, it could be
Yeah.
a romance, about lesbian I don't know.
Definitely not a horror specific
It's one
name.
it's a title that you have to watch the movie first and then the name makes sense, and I feel like if you are an unknown filmmaker and this is a very unique movie, you need a title that kinda lets people in on at least the fact that this is gonna be a brutal horror movie. Day of the Woman doesn't do that.
No,
Uh
no, it definitely does not.
So, once the movie actually hit some theaters, it immediately drew some serious backlash for its graphic violence and rape scenes, with feminists protesting the film, claiming it glorified rape. This was super confusing to me because when I watched it, I took it as showing how fucked up rape was. And it's one thing to know what happens to a person in this situation, it's a whole other thing to see what happens to a person that goes through this, and I just don't really understand how people initially thought it was glorifying it.
Yeah, I completely disagree as well. The light that I seen it in is, it very much takes away the narrative of, the male coming in and saving the damsel in
Yeah,
distress. Like, it is a female empowerment. Like, both
100%.
both of these movies are a woman who was, you know, treated wrong, and her femininity was used for this group of males' desires, and they pass her around and they objectify her, and she, instead of going for somebody else to help or trying to or relying on a male character to come in and save the day. Both characters take matters into their own hands and show that, women are powerful and they're capable. And it was a very, very powerful feminist movie to me. Like, I completely seen it in a different light.
I do not understand how they came up with that. I mean, you get this woman, she's a novelist, and she by the end of the movie, she's killed 4 capable men
Yeah.
by herself with her hands.
Yeah,
Like,
and the men that are in it are especially in the original, are not the smartest men. Well, I'd
no?
say both of them, the remake and the original. They're kind of bumbling idiots,
Yeah.
and you have this very, very smart female, and she essentially outsmarts and overpowers them and, uses different ways in each movie of how she gets her revenge, but both ways are like the original especially, she's using her femininity to
Against them.
her advantage
Yeah.
to lure them and to show the weaknesses of the male mind and how easily that they could be manipulated for her revenge. That is very much a feminist movie to me.
She
It
walks
doesn't
them right into her trap.
it doesn't glorify the male characters. It doesn't make them likable in any way at all. Like, I think 99% of people who watch this movie fucking despise all the characters outside of the main character.
Yeah, definitely. But yeah, needless to say, critics hated this movie, specifically Roger Ebert and his gay lover Gene Siskel, who made it their mission to drag the film through the mud as much as possible, with Ebert giving it no stars, referring to it as, quote, a vile bag of garbage that doesn't have a shred of artistic distinction. He also went on to say that, quote, watching the film was one of the most depressing experiences of his life and considered it the worst movie ever made. A bit dramatic, I would say. Also, Ebert and Siskel were not gay together. It was a joke. Don't sue me. But yeah, I think that the original has its issues, which we'll get into later, but it's by far not the worst movie ever made. Yeah,
No,
not
no,
by a mile.
I think that, and Roger Ebert, you get into it. I think that the original scarred him so much that when the remake was made, he of course shit all over that too.
Mhm.
And I think that this movie just touched him in a way that hurt him.
Mr. Ebert, show us on the doll where I spit on your grave touched you. So anyway, not only did critics trash the film, but the governments of the world also hated it and quickly tried to censor it as much as possible. Many countries, including Ireland, Norway, Iceland, and West Germany, banned the film altogether. Canada also banned it on the grounds that it glorified violence against women, which wasn't changed until the 1990s.
Violence that is, I mean, every male character meets a violent demise in both movies. Like,
I don't think the
uh,
violence against her is glorified in any way. I feel like for me, I don't like watching it. When I watch it, it makes me angry. It makes me
yes.
mad. And it bothers me that this happens to real people. None of that is glorified.
Yeah, hiding these things that are real life things that happen to people that, really destroy people's lives is why things got as bad as they did, was covering it up and not talking about it. We've seen years through, the 40s, 50s, and 60s where this was happening to women by their dad and their uncles and their grandparents, and
Sometimes husbands.
it
Yeah.
was known in their fucking family, and it was just to not be spoke on. Like, you don't speak about it, you don't mention it, and it was really the horror of the 70s and 80s that really started kinda shedding light on these things, and I think him making the scene as real as possible is super important to shed a light on how horrifying That's part of what makes this movie such a good scary movie is how horrifying that things that happen in real life. Like, this is things that has happened in real life, and it's not on, like, a Jeffrey Dahmer, John Wayne Gacy
Like a rarity,
might
yeah.
come across you. Like, everybody knows a woman in their
It's
life
one
that
in
has
four.
yeah, that has happened that this has happened to.
Yeah, that's why I was saying earlier, like, it's one thing to know that this happens, like what happens to somebody in this situation, but it is very different to see it.
Yeah, covering it up is literally what gave it the stigma and allowed it to continue and get as bad as it did, and mental health not to be there for victims. It made victims scared to speak up. Women went to their grave with things like this happening to them that literally destroyed their lives, their entire as far as like confidence, and covering it up was the reason that we never really got the resources, and women didn't feel like they could speak up about these things. So I commend the horror movies of this time that showed the real life horrors of what was happening. And I don't think they glorify it at all. I I like I said, I see it both movies as a feminine empowerment movie, and I think that other people seeing it as, glorifying rape is people finding what they want to see. Like, if you're watching this movie and you've already got that mindset, like a Roger Ebert, I'm sure he heard about this movie before he
He
watched
had
it.
an
He
opinion probably
probably
before he's seen it, yeah.
went into it. He seen some shit that made him real uncomfortable, and he fucking trashed it and said it was glorifying. Like, if you are looking for something, you are going to find it.
So, Australia opted to release a censored American version in 1982 and didn't approve the full uncut version until 2004. Which,
Eh,
by the way, in my research, I found out that Australian censorship law forbids the release of films that depict scenes of sexual violence as acceptable or justified, which I thought was a little heavy handed.
yeah.
Yeah, that's like, I didn't know Australia censored films like that. So, in the UK, the film was, of course, denied a cinema certificate by the British government, where they then quickly labeled the movie a video nasty, causing it to appear on the Director of Public Prosecution's list of prosecutable films. That is a mouthful. That is until the year 2001, when a heavily cut version that edited out around 7 minutes of the rape scenes was released to the public. They then dropped another censored version in 2011 with only 3 minutes removed, and still to this day, a fully uncut version of the film has yet to be released in the UK.
Damn.
Wow. Yeah, so as of 2026, the Irish Film Classification Office still has the film banned from sale, with retailers prohibited from purchasing any uncensored versions due to the nature of the film. The movie did pretty poorly at the box office, but did manage to have success in the home video market, reaching number 24 on Billboard's 1981 list of best-selling titles, sitting in the top 40 for 14 consecutive weeks, which led to writer-director Meir Zarchi to claim in a 1984 Fangoria interview that at least 20 million people worldwide had seen his film. Since its release, the movie has been reappraised, with many viewers and critics claiming that it's actually a misunderstood feminist film and a vehicle of personal expression reacting to violence against women. Some of the critics themselves, who rallied against the film in the media after its initial release, have since had a change of heart, claiming that they were wrong and now understand that the audience is meant to identify with the main character Jennifer and not the four attackers. And I was like, yeah, you
No,
think?
no shit.
How in the fuck are you a film critic? And somehow that went over your head.
Yeah, it's got to go back to the don't talk about it thing.
Well, I think the other part of it too is like when when let's say you have 100 critics and you're the one who's like, "I don't get what the fuck you guys are talking about." A lot of people don't wanna be that one.
Yeah.
They'll just go ahead and just take the opinion of everybody else.
But it just, it goes to show that not everybody just happened to have changed their mind about this film at the same time. It's how cultures changed. We went from
Outlook,
a
yeah.
very much of a don't talk about it because it makes us uncomfortable. We all know somebody who would or has done something like this, or maybe you got some people watching it that do stuff like or have done something like this in the past, and they don't wanna be essentially the light shined on it,
Well,
they want the skeletons in the closet, and they wanna keep them there.
well, as soon as people start talking about it and basically admitting there's a problem, then it's like, well, what are we gonna do with poor Uncle Jerry over there who's molested all the women in the family? Like
Yeah,
we can't have him at Christmas anymore. We can't pretend like this isn't happening.
we gotta
Yeah.
take poor Uncle Jerry out to the backyard and put him down.
Yeah. So the film was followed by an unofficial sequel in 1993 titled Savage Vengeance, in which Camille Keaton reprises her iconic role as Jennifer Hill. The film eventually, like everything, spawned a 2010 remake, which then got two sequels of its own. I Spit on Your Grave 2 in 2013, and I Spit on Your Grave 3, Vengeance is Mine from 2015. And then a direct sequel to the original in 1978 was eventually released in 2019, titled I Spit on Your Grave Deja Vu, with Zarchi and Keaton both returning for the project. And finally, also in 2019, it was revealed in her autobiography Inside Out that a young Demi Moore was actually the scantily clad woman on the film's iconic movie poster, standing there with her back turned and booty cheeks peeking out of her underwear, which apparently had been kept a secret all those years for some reason. I never really came across the answers for why this was a guarded secret, but the cat's out of the bag as of 2019. All right, so let's move on to Remake. Ratings. IMDb 6.2 out of 10. Rotten Tom 32%. Letterboxd 2.5 out of 5. I Spit on Your Grave is a 2010 rape and revenge film directed by Stephen R. Monroe and rewritten by Stuart Morse. It was based off of the Meir Zarchi's original story, with Zarchi serving as one of the film's executive producers. It was produced by Centel Films, released on October 8th of 2010, had a budget of $2 million and a box office of a little under $573,000. So it lost quite a bit of money, but I will explain why in a minute. Now, much like its predecessor, this movie had a pretty small budget, not anywhere near the life savings that funded the first film, but still the $2 million budget came with some serious restraints, like the actors having to do their own stunts, real unloaded weapons being used because they couldn't afford prop guns, and eliminating Jennifer's dog from the script because apparently they would have had to pay the dog and the trainer more than any of the actors.
Damn.
The one that is concerning is the guns. Like, that is something I wouldn't say you'd scrap from the budget.
Yeah, that's definitely not a good idea,
I mean, like,
but,
let's just go
that's
without wardrobe for this scene. We gotta get these prop guns.
things have changed much, let's just put it like that. I don't think, like, there's a whole lot of movies getting away with scrapping the prop guns
Well, I
these
mean, this
days.
is 2010. I mean, this isn't drastically long ago, but
Yeah,
there has
it's
been a
it's
major
kinda
accident.
yeah, there definitely was. It shined a light heavily. But, there was an accident prior that was very big, killing Brandon Lee, so
Mhm.
I'm surprised that this even happened in 2010,
Yeah.
that was even got through the cracks.
So pre-production moved pretty fast here, and as soon as casting was finished, the actors were informed that they had only 2 weeks to learn their lines before filming started. When it comes to the lead role, mostly unknown actress Sarah Butler was chosen to play Jennifer Hills. But there was a problem. she didn't accept the offer right away because she was actually not a fan of horror and was initially turned off by the rape and violence in the story. So she then asked for a week or so to think it over, where her agent then convinced her that she would be stupid to turn down a part where she got to play such a badass and scary woman, leading her to call up the casting supervisor and officially accept the role. Principal photography began on November 2nd of 2009 in Shreveport, Louisiana, and wrapped up on July 15th of that same year. After post-production was finished, the film headed to the Texas Frightmare Film Festival, where it debuted on May 1st, 2010 at the Sheridan Grand Hotel in Irving, Texas. The Canadian unrated version then premiered at the Fantasia International Film Festival on July 20th of 2010, and finally, an unrated version opened in limited theaters in the U.S. on October 8th of 2010, which is why the box office is so low. It really wasn't going to be released in theaters, and then they released it in, a very small list of theaters for one day. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, hard to make up too much of your box office,
Yeah,
on one day.
I think the plan was to recoup the money in home video sales. So,
Which I think they probably have.
well, that's kind of what happened with the first one. The first one kind of made all its money in home video releases. So when they went and did this one, they probably just said, we'll probably catch a bunch of hell for all the stuff, violence in the movie, so let's not even put it in theaters. So after its release, critics' reactions to the film were genuinely negative, with a 31% rating on Rotten Tomatoes out of 62 reviews. Now you might be wondering, did Roger Ebert ever change his mind about his 0 stars rating? Did he ever realize the true motivations behind the original, much like many of his fellow critics did? Well, the answer is a big, fat nope. Because just like in 1978, he rated this film 0 stars as well, describing it as the, quote, despicable remake of the despicable 1978 film. And even went further, saying the remake is more offensive because it lingers lovingly and has a greater length on realistic verbal, psychological, and physical violence against women, and then reduces her revenge to cartoonish horror flick impossibilities.
No, I disagree with that. I see that very differently.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure he already had that 0 star rating the moment he found out that he was gonna have to review that movie.
Yeah, I was gonna say it does not matter what they put on film, being that it was a I Spit on Your Grave remake. He
He would
was
have to
go
admit
he
he's
was
wrong.
he was going in there
Yeah.
with a negative opinion.
Now, despite a lot of critics trashing this thing, some did come to the film's defense, with the New York Times writing, quote, female empowerment or just plain prudence. I Spit on Your Grave is an extremely efficient grindhouse type film. If you can't handle it, don't go see it. I agree.
Hell yeah.
I agree. Like the original, the film did find underground horror fan support, with Fangoria magazine even writing, the film is just as raw and upsetting with its on-screen brutality as the original was, perhaps even more so, since the acting is significantly better this time around. I will agree with that. All right, so I Spit on Your Grave 2, also directed by Stephen R. Monroe, was released in limited theaters on September 20th of 2013, but does not feature Sarah Butler in the film. And then finally, the other sequel was in March of 2015, I Spit on Your Grave 3, Vengeance is Mine, was announced by Anchor Bay Entertainment, with Sarah Butler officially returning as Jennifer Hills. All right, so we're going to do a quick head-to-head recap with inflation. Get these things compared fair. So the original, 101 minutes, remake, 108 minutes. The original's budget, $408,000. The remake's budget, $3 million. The original box office is non-existent, and the remake's box office is $875,000. So ratings, original Rotten Tom 51, remake 32. IMDb 5.7, remake 6.2. And finally, Letterboxd 2.8, and the remake bringing in a 2.5. So they're slightly neck and neck. They're close. They're close. OG took it in Rotten Tomatoes and Letterboxd, and Remake took it in IMDb, but
Yeah.
not by much. All right, so I'm going to give some really quick overviews of both the film's plots, and then we'll kind of talk about what was changed once we go through both of them. So we start off by meeting our main character, Jennifer Hills, who is an accomplished female writer from New York City who has chosen to rent a lake house in the small town of Kent, Connecticut in order to begin work on her new book. The arrival of an attractive and independent young woman attracts the attention of Johnny Stillman, the local gas station manager, and his small group of losers. One of those friends is a mentally disabled man named Matthew Duncan, and one afternoon, Matthew delivers some groceries to Jennifer, where he quickly becomes fascinated by her life in New York City and her obvious beauty. And as we will learn here soon, despite Matthew being well into his 20s, he is still a virgin, meaning he is probably very horny all the time. So after this brief friendly meeting, Matthew then heads back to town and immediately tells his friends about the attractive and successful young woman all alone in that big house by the lake. And to make matters worse, he lies about Jennifer, informing the three other men that she showed him her boobs, which is such like this is like an eighth grade thing.
Right, he has the mind of a
Yeah.
child.
So after checking out the house later that night, trying to confirm Matthew's story, the gang then decides they have the perfect opportunity to help their friend lose his virginity, whether Jennifer is interested or not. The next day, we see her floating around the lake relaxing in a string bikini while paddling a small red canoe when suddenly the other two members of the group, named Stanley and Andy, fly past her in their motorboat, almost hitting her as they immediately begin stage one of their horrendous plan. They end up grabbing her canoe's tie-off rope, allowing them to essentially tow her to the other side of the lake, where they end up dragging her to shore as she attempts to fight back. After a bit of a struggle, Jennifer manages to get away, running off into the woods, completely naked at this point, when she is suddenly attacked by Johnny and Matthew. And it pretty quickly becomes clear that Johnny plans on sexually assaulting her right here in the woods with his friends watching. And that is exactly what happens as we then see the other three men help hold her down while Johnny grunts on top of her. And once he finishes up, the real point of all this is revealed, as Johnny then demands Matthew remove his pants in order to have sex with her. Now, thankfully, Matthew immediately doesn't feel right about all this and admits to Johnny that he just can't do it, which of course leads to ridicule from his friends and Johnny instructing his friend Andy, aka Suspenders Guy, to go on ahead with the rape, which quickly turns even more violent, leading to Jennifer to not only be sexually assaulted, but also physically beaten. Once Andy finishes up, they then let a badly injured, dazed, and confused Jennifer leave, stumbling back through the woods, hopefully in the direction of her lake house. But a little while later, before she gets home, she is again attacked by the men, who quickly surround her, forcing her to lay face down on a large boulder as she is, again, brutally beaten while being raped by two of the men. And apparently, this was actually an anal thing, but the censors agreed here in the US to give the film the R rating if all the mentions for the anal stuff was removed.
Damn.
Yeah.
Well, they do, and I don't know if you can see it outside of the upgrade, the 4K
blood?
upgrade, but yeah, there
Yeah.
is some blood there. And I was thinking, more than likely when this movie was released, you probably couldn't see that because it's very, very
Grainy,
small,
yeah.
very hard thing to catch on the 4K scan of it.
So yeah, after yet another brutal attack, the men wander off into the woods, leaving Jennifer all alone in very bad shape, where we see that she is now covered in red marks, small cuts and bruises, and bleeding from between her legs. After a while, she manages to get back up and slowly head towards her house, and as soon as she stumbles in the door, she grabs the phone and attempts to call for help. But as soon as the operator answers, the call is abruptly ended as we then see Johnny kick the phone out of her hand, revealing all four men are now in her home, ready for the third and final assault. And this time they get Matthew a little drunk where he finally agrees to remove his pants and rape her. After a few minutes of him flopping around like a fish on top of her, Matthew admits that he cannot orgasm due to the stress of the situation. This prompts him to give up, where we then see Stanley jump on top of her, beating her in the face, forcing his penis in her mouth, and penetrating her with a fucking wine bottle. It even gets so bad that Johnny himself thinks that this has gone too far, demanding Stanley to finish up so they can leave.
I almost wonder if Stanley was, because he's the only one that doesn't actually penetrate her. I almost wonder if he was embarrassed, and that's why he like beats her so bad.
Maybe.
Because even the guy who they were taking there, who was a special person,
Yeah.
has a very bad mental illness, has the brain of a child,
Yeah.
was able to do this, and he is yet to get there. And he makes an attempt prior, and she fights him off. And I wondered if it was almost like an embarrassment thing for him, because he kind of snaps on her.
Yeah, he freaks out. That's a good point. There's something up with him.
Yeah, he doesn't have that attitude at any other
No,
part in the movie.
he's quiet.
Yeah, and it's very much like she fought him off, and then, they got the special guy in there to do his thing, and he was last up, he had to take his turn, and he couldn't perform, so he was embarrassed, and so he beat the fuck out of her for it.
Well, another thing that I want to bring up, it might be me. The leader, Johnny. I spent the whole fucking movie like, oh my God, he reminds me of Krug. He looks
Yeah.
like Krug.
He does kinda look like Krug.
Yeah, which
Um,
also looks like Shane from The Walking Dead.
Yeah,
They're all related.
he looks like Krug.
I was like wondering
he's
is that just me? Because I hated Krug.
he's like a younger Krug. But if I remember right, the guy who played Krug made the female lead in The Last
Yeah.
House on the Left
Drove her nuts.
absolutely miserable, and I was really, really scared getting into this movie
Oh, the
that
production.
the original was gonna be similar. I
Yeah.
was praying that that wasn't the case.
Sounds like the opposite.
Because it's an older Grindhouse, low budget movie.
No
They didn't
rules.
have rules, yeah. Yeah, so I'm so glad to hear that she did not have a negative experience making this movie.
Yeah, definitely. So once the four men finish up, they then rush out of the house, and we see that Jennifer has been beaten unconscious, and Johnny starts to realize that unless they kill her, she is going to get them all thrown in jail. This prompts him to demand Matthew go back inside with his knife and kill her before they all get in the boat and leave. Matthew, of course, pleads for Johnny to pick someone else, but Johnny refuses, leaving Matthew without much of a choice in the matter, where he then goes inside, and while attempting to coach himself into completing the task, he stands over her body, and then he decides not to kill her, and instead wipes some of her blood on the blade of the knife, where he then goes outside and lies to his friends, informing them that he stabbed her really deep, and she is currently bleeding to death on the living room floor. Once Johnny and the gang feel like they have covered their bases, they all four get in the boat, fleeing from the scene of the crime, totally believing that they are now free and clear and someone will find the body in a few days. But that never happens, because as we see next, Jennifer survives the attack, nurses herself back to health, and tries to move on from the traumatizing event. We then fast forward to a couple weeks later, and Johnny's gang starts getting worried that nobody has found the body yet, prompting him to send Andy and Stanley by the boat to scope out what is going on at the house. And this is where they discover that Jennifer is indeed still alive and hasn't left Kent yet. After they see her sunbathing in the backyard, they then speed off, immediately running to the gas station to tell Johnny what they found, which eventually leads to the three men beating up Matthew for lying and kicking him off the property. After Jennifer sees Andy and Stanley drive past, she realizes that they will most likely come back in full force in order to finish the job, and this is where she decides that if she wants any kind of peace, she's gonna have to deal with the four men herself.
Yeah, this is why I don't see how people can't see it as a feminist film, and really shining light on the don't talk about it and cover it up aspect, she doesn't even go to get help because she
Nope,
knows it's
Simon.
useless.
Yep, it's useless.
It's literally it's useless. Nothing's gonna happen. They're gonna write a report. Nothing's gonna get done in this small town. So instead, she stands her ground. She doesn't even fucking leave this place, which is insane to me. But not only does she stay here, she is literally fucking sunbathing out there when they ride by on the boat, as if she is not going to let their toxicity run her out of staying at this property and writing this book, and she is going to take matters into her own hands.
Yeah, and, another part with that too is, like, it's probably a good thing she didn't go to the police because, like, in a little town back then, Johnny's fucking dad could be the sheriff for all you know. I mean, that's a big thing in small towns is, everybody's related to somebody. It's, very few people, and most likely you're either really good friends or you know the fucking police.
Yeah,
And
no.
an outsider comes in and tries to blame you for something, they're gonna be swimming against the current there.
Yeah, and there, because it wasn't talked about, there wasn't things in place like, police departments having specialists who talk or female officers who are
Yeah, training
trained
in
in
there.
this whenever a female comes in and they take them it's very seriously. Back then that wasn't a thing, and it was very much because of the hush hush.
And that's why all
Uh
that stuff exists now.
yeah,
Yeah.
and it kills me that people fucking shit all over movies like this and The Last House on the Left for showing the depictions of real life. It's just it made people uncomfortable, so they didn't talk about it. And horror, I feel like was the 100% the genre that put that at the forefront and started that conversation.
So we then see her head to a church, now wearing all black, where she walks up to the altar and asks God to forgive her for what she is about to do. We then get a surveillance montage where we see Jennifer secretly watching the guys, looking for the best way to get them alone so she can pick them off one by one. That scene where she's watching Johnny with his wife and kids, knowing what she's going to do, is fucking cold, and I love it.
Yeah.
She did not let that shit change her mind. Good
No.
good for you. So anyway, once she feels confident about her plan, she calls up the local store and orders more groceries, knowing that Matthew is the only delivery guy and will be forced to come to her house alone. We then jump back to Matthew, who is now super freaked out after learning about the delivery, prompting him to steal a large knife to take with him just in case this is a setup. Once Matthew arrives, he is confronted by Jennifer, who actually does the complete opposite of what Matthew was expecting. We then see her start to flirt with him, luring him into the woods behind the home, where she then starts to seduce him, telling the scared and confused man that she could have given him a summer he would have never forgotten. Matthew then kind of reaches a boiling point where he lashes out at Jennifer, explaining that she is the reason he no longer has any friends, but she ends up calming him down by abruptly kissing his neck and eventually unbuttoning his pants and giving him a good old fashioned BJ. This quickly leads to her getting undressed and laying on the ground, inviting Matthew to have sex with her, to which he does. And while he is distracted with her vagina, she quietly reaches over, grabs the end of a noose, and places it around his neck, where she then jumps up, pulling the other end of the rope tight, as we then slowly start to see Matthew choking to death as his feet start to rise from the ground. Once he is about a foot high, she ties the rope off and pushes the struggling Matthew out towards the water, where he hangs there for a few minutes until he finally dies, now covered in mud, with his fucking pants and underwear down by his feet. What a shameful way to spend your last few minutes of life, dangling there with your fucking limp dick out, muddy underwear around your ankles.
Yeah, and, this goes back to her using the very thing they used against her. She uses her femininity to lure him in this case, and it literally his childlike mind, very important to put this for anybody who's never watched this movie, but he thinks that his friends are mad because he didn't go through with killing her. So he's thinking, all I gotta do is go there and kill her and they'll be happy. But in reality, this probably pissed them off even more. They now know she's been lodged. She never went to the police. They never got in trouble. Everything blew over, and now killing her is just gonna make things worse. But him having this childlike mind, he's thinking, now
This is simple.
I've gotta kill her to
Yeah.
get my friends back.
Simple solution.
And she uses her femininity to overcome that and overpower him.
So once she is satisfied he is dead, she releases the rope, which immediately causes Matthew's body to plunge into the water, quickly sinking a few feet down. We then see her grab his bike and the bag of food, pushing them both into the water next to the dead man's body, and calls the store where she complains about her order never arriving. Very smart move. We then cut to the next day where we see a dressed up, nice looking Jennifer drive over to the gas station where she pulls up next to Johnny to talk. And they immediately start up a conversation with Johnny at first pretending he doesn't know who she is. But she then turns on that seductive charm and convinces him she wants him to get in her car and go for a drive where they can then fool around. This guy is a fucking idiot. Once he falls for it, we see her drive him out to an area surrounded by the woods where she pulls a pistol on him and forces him to get naked. Once he undresses, he attempts to blame it all on the other guys, pleading for mercy and even trying to guilt trip her by bringing up his children. Jennifer pretends this works, tossing the gun and kissing him, which leads to her inviting him back to her place for a bubble bath and some consensual sex. We then cut to them both in the bathroom, soaking in the tub together, where Johnny mentions how he got a phone call yesterday about Matthew going missing. And to further my point about him being a fucking idiot, he does not put the pieces together here, which leads to Jennifer having to flat out admit that she killed Matthew, whose body is now at the bottom of the lake. And this fucking doofus refuses to believe her. When she then starts playing with his dick under the water, and this distracts him just enough for her to reach down and grab that big-ass knife Matthew brought from the store, and once she has the weapon in her hand, she quietly puts it under the soapy water, positioning it between his legs, and after a few seconds, she decides it's time to strike, using the blade to slice his dick clean open. The cut is so fast and clean, Johnny doesn't even realize what just happened at first. That is, until the pain suddenly starts to appear as the water quickly turns red. Once she cuts the shit out of him, she then casually stands up, gets out of the bath, and dries off, leaving the room, making sure to lock the door behind her as we then hear the sweet, sweet sounds of Johnny screaming for help as he bleeds to death. I honestly love this kill. It's very satisfying, and the fact that he had to sit there and just bleed to death with no way out and nobody to help him is great.
I really love this kill for the setup too. So she clearly takes him out there to shoot him. Like there would be no part of the plan where this would work. She could have taken him to the house to begin with. She was going to shoot him, and he blames it on his friends. He talks about his kids, but then he uses the old super conservative, it was your fault, you led me on, I did what any guy would have done in this situation. That is his exact words. And he talks about how she was, skirting around in her dress and leading him on. And it is at that moment where she pauses and gets an idea, and she pretends to let him take the gun, ease it out of her hands, because it is at this moment where she says that this is too easy of a death for him. I'm going to castrate him.
Fantastic.
I'm going to let him think that he has convinced me. I'm going to take him back, and I'm going to cut his dick off.
And I like it.
Fantastic.
So a few hours later, we cut to the aftermath of the murder as we then see Johnny's pale, dead body laying on the steps to the basement as Jennifer scrubs all of this smeared blood from the walls, floor, and tub of the bathroom. We then cut to what is left of the gang as we see a worried looking Stanley and Andy sitting at the now closed gas station while Johnny's wife and kids sit in the parking lot wanting to know where the hell he is. Once it becomes apparent the two men don't have any answers for Johnny's wife, she gets super pissed and runs them off, telling them to leave the property and never come back. Stanley and Andy immediately know that Matthew and Johnny are dead, and it most likely all ties back to what they did to Jennifer. And this is where they decide to go on the offensive, jumping in the boat and speeding towards Jennifer's house to get her before she gets them. They try to be slick and split up, with Andy approaching through the woods and Stanley driving up on the boat, hoping to distract her long enough for Andy to kill her with an axe. But when Stanley pulls up, he is surprised she is nowhere to be found. She then swims up to his boat, revealing that she was hiding under the water the whole time, waiting for her opportunity, when suddenly she just hops in the boat with him, where she then pushes him overboard, cranks the motor, and drives off, leaving him stranded in the water. At first, he is super confused, but after about 30 seconds, she spins the boat around and essentially acts like she is going to run him over, replicating what they did to her on the first day of the attack.
Yeah, this is also like she's circling her prey here, and it's very metaphoric in her circling her prey, but it's also creating a wake where he's only able to tread water for so long, and she's creating this constant wake around him, and I thought that was really smart.
Well, the other really smart thing too is she's not doing it because it's like, oh yeah, this is what you did to me. She's really doing it because she's trying to draw the other one out. The
Yeah,
other one's somewhere, and she knows this, but where?
yeah.
And putting his buddy in trouble, stranding him in there with this wake, is going to bring the other guy out. So after a couple close calls, Stanley gets scared and starts to panic, where he then starts screaming for Andy to help him. And Andy, who's watching from behind a tree, decides that he can't just stand by and watch the only friend he has left get murdered by this bitch, prompting him to run out into the water with his axe, just like she wanted him to.
Well, yeah, I mean, essentially, like, he can't swim off. Like, she has him, no matter what,
His bend, yeah.
yeah, he's gonna get hit by this boat if he tries to swim out of this circle that she's creating. And anybody who's ever tried to see how long they can just tread water,
It's a workout.
it's not forever. So his only other option would have been to sit there and literally watch his friend drown.
So this is perfect timing for Jennifer, who quickly spins the boat around, heading straight for Andy, where she then ends up getting him to wildly swing the axe at her as she passes by, going fast as fuck. And as soon as the blade hits the side of the boat, it causes him to lose his grip and drop it, where it then lands right next to Jennifer. Once this happens, it leaves both men stranded in the water with no weapons, prompting Andy to try and swim out to Stanley in order to help him get back to shore. But right as they are reunited, Jennifer comes flying by on the boat, swinging the axe with all her might, planting the blade right into Andy's back, pretty much immediately killing him right in front of Stanley. And once she is finally down to the last man, she pulls up to him, cuts the motor off, and allows him to swim over and use the boat to keep afloat. And after a brief conversation where he begs for his life, Jennifer then looks down at him, repeats the order that he gave to her during the sexual assaults, which is, "Suck it, bitch," as we then see her suddenly crank the motor, which immediately disembowels him with the propeller, instantly killing him right then and there in front of her. And as she speeds away, the camera changes angles, where we see that a now hardened Jennifer has finally got her revenge and has absolutely no guilt about any of the lives she just took. And that is the end of I Spit on Your Grave from 1978.
Well, I love that he was saved for last during the rape scene. It's one of the most impactful moments of the entire thing.
Yeah, he's the one that put that
He
bottle
he
there.
gets up there and she says, "I'm hurt." She's like, she wakes up, she kind of in and out of consciousness, and she says, "Please, I'm hurt." She says, "I'll do it with my hand. You'll enjoy it, I promise." She's essentially begging him, like, I'm I'm fucked up, I'm hurt. Like, you this is going to kill me. I will go along with it. I will do whatever you want, just please don't hurt me anymore. And that very much mimics him swimming to the boat, begging for his life, and then trying to, blame it on everybody else, and she's able to get him with the propeller blade.
Yeah, and what makes that even more interesting is, she was genuinely fucked up. He's just tired.
Yeah,
He's just wore out. He's not hurt. He's
yeah.
just tired. All right, so let's do the remake. So, once again, we start out with novelist Jennifer Hills traveling from New York City to Louisiana this time in order to work on her next book in privacy. The gas station attendant, Johnny Miller, gives her directions to her rented cabin after she gets turned around and lost. He then embarrasses himself by attempting to flirt with her, prompting her to poke fun at him, which immediately puts a target on her back, setting the story in motion much quicker than the 1978 film. When the cabin's plumbing becomes clogged, it is fixed by a local mentally disabled man named Matthew Duncan, who she rewards with an abrupt kiss of gratitude. Matthew tells Johnny and his friends, Andy and Stanley, about what happened with Jennifer, and Johnny, whose ego was bruised after the gas station incident, decides that Jennifer is a snobbish city bitch who needs to be taught a lesson. That night, the four men sneak into the cabin to taunt and assault her, although Matthew initially refuses to participate. She then manages to escape into the dark woods, where she ends up running into the local sheriff named Storch, who is accompanied by his friend and gas station owner Earl, who is also the owner of the cabin Jennifer is renting. Sheriff Storch then takes Jennifer back to the cabin to investigate her claims, but when he finds her drugs and alcohol, he immediately casts doubts on her story, essentially treating her like the criminal. While Jennifer and the sheriff are at the cabin, Johnny, Matthew, Andy, and Stanley all return, leading to the four men plus the sheriff to torment, beat, and gang rape her, including an initially reluctant Matthew, who thus finally loses his virginity. While this attack is taking place, we see that Stanley is recording everything with his handheld video camera because he's a fucking weirdo and likes to go back and watch this horrible shit over and over again. And after all the men finish taking their turns violating and beating Jennifer, Sheriff Storch prepares to shoot her dead right there on an old wooden bridge so she would never be able to report any of them for what they did to her, when suddenly a naked and badly beaten Jennifer jumps into the river, attempting to escape. The sheriff then stands there for at least an hour watching for her to resurface, but thankfully she never does, forcing him to order the others to search the riverbanks and areas where the rivers cross and intersect to hopefully find her dead body, and if not, at least get a chance to kill her before she can reach any other authorities. We then get a month-long time jump where none of the men have found a single trace of Jennifer alive or dead, and we find out here that her family from New York have begun to worry, considering no one has heard from her in 4 weeks. But fear not, because Jennifer is not dead, as we then see her reappear after healing up from her injuries, where she then begins to stalk her rapists in order to learn the details of their lives. Stanley then tells Andy and Johnny that his camera has been stolen along with the videotape of the assault. When we then find out that that very same videotape has resurfaced at Sheriff Storch's home, where it was revealed to have been sent to his wife, making the sheriff realize that this shit isn't over and he better move fast if he wants to defeat Jennifer. After he finds this out, he immediately confronts the rest of the group in order to find out who sent the tape, with Johnny and Andy announcing that they suspect it was Matthew, considering Matthew hasn't been the same since the attack on Jennifer, where it is revealed that he feels a massive amount of guilt for his participation. We then cut to a hunting trip with Sheriff Storch and Earl, who he quickly shoots and kills, fearing that he may be a loose end if an investigation results from the disappearance of Jennifer or that missing tape. We then cut to Matthew, who wanders into an abandoned cabin in the woods where he suddenly encounters Jennifer, who, despite his apology, ends up strangling him until he falls unconscious. She does not kill him. Very important.
Yeah, it's also very important. So the rape scene, you did the first one a lot more in detail. This is actually takes place over a pretty large amount of time, but Matthew, so this version of Matthew from the original is a lot more mentally disabled.
Oh,
Like,
yeah, yeah.
the guy who plays him, but, obviously there's a lot of different disabilities and stuff, but this guy is on a higher level of disability, and the guy who plays him does a really good job playing him.
It's actually Jesse
But
from Fast and Furious.
when they do finally get him where he takes his clothes off and goes over there, he gets really into it and starts strangling her. So this is very poetic that, he gets really obsessed after she escapes. He's like looking for her all the time. He can't get it out of his head. He's seeing her different places. When he finally does see her, like he does this apology, and it's just super poetic that she chooses strangling him.
Yeah. And unlike the 1978, she doesn't kill him here. What she's actually doing is setting up something for the end,
Yeah.
which we'll get to in a minute.
But yeah, you don't know that
You don't
yet.
know that, yeah. Because that when I watched it, I was like, "Wait, whoa, what the fuck?"
Yeah, well, and if you're a fan of the original, I think that was a cool
Yeah.
little switch up to do. I also think, like, the addition of the whole sheriff thing, if you weren't a fan of the original and you went into this story knowing nothing about it, the running into the sheriff and her taking him back to the cabin and it being empty and watching it slowly play out to where he starts engaging in rape before the other people even come back in,
Mhm.
it's very much like just gut-wrenching, and there is both of these scenes do very, very gut-wrenching things.
So she then captures Stanley in a bear trap, ties him to a tree, shoves a dead rat into his mouth, and puts fish hooks through his eyelids, as well as smearing fish guts on his face, and then leaves his camera to record him as a bunch of crows begin pecking his eyes out, eventually leading to his horrible death. This death is actually stretched out over, like, I don't know, fucking 10, 15 minutes. And I really like the death, man. Like, I really like the kill, like, his eyelids being stretched out and him being forced to hold his head a certain way
Well,
or not blink. Oh, yeah.
well, it it's also super poetic in the fact that and she even says it at one point, he is a sexual voyeur.
Mm.
He enjoys filming this shit, like, he obviously gets off on going back and watching it. He seems to enjoy the going back and watching it more than the actual taking place in it, and by her using the fish hooks to force him to watch himself die,
Great.
I thought was super, super slick and poetic.
It's kinda like the movie Peeping Tom, where he's got the camera with the big mirror, and then he's got the big spike, so he would film victims seeing their self being murdered.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is, really old, like, one of the first slasher movies. Definitely check it out if you're a fan of slashers, but really fucking unique idea.
Yeah, it's also worth mentioning for those that are our age will remember. So the original, like, handheld digital cameras, you could actually
Flip,
turn the
yeah,
screen back the other way,
and record yourself.
like almost selfies on a
Yeah.
phone. So that's what she does. So that's why he is forced to watch himself die.
So, she then captures Andy tying his body up over over top of a tub filled with water and lye, and this forces Andy to try and hold himself up for as long as he can, because once his muscles give out, he will then be forced to put his face first into this lye, which will immediately begin burning his skin, which is exactly what happens. Is one of those like, "Well, I'm not gonna kill you right now, it's gonna be up to you."
Yeah,
But you will die.
this is another this is what I love about the remake is every way that she kills them goes back to one of the things that they did during her rape scene. for his part in the rape scene, he actually it's during the second part where she walks outside and you think she's free, and then they all surround her and go at her again, and he throws her face down into
In
a
the mud,
puddle,
yeah.
and he is literally shoving her head underwater and, like, to the point of almost drowning her and then pulling her head back up. So, for her kill for him, he literally essentially forces him to plank himself above this tub of water, knowing that he can only hold himself up for so long before he's going to essentially start drowning himself.
Yeah, he's gonna do it to himself. So next we cut to her tying Johnny to the rafters of an abandoned house where she then uses pliers to pull out all of his teeth one by one, as well as a pair of pruning shears which she uses to cut off his dick, forcing the severed penis into his mouth, where she eventually leaves him there to bleed to death. Very brutal. And of
Yeah,
course, the teeth goes back to when he first
yeah.
encounters her in the house, and I thought I misheard him at first. He was like, "Let me see your teeth," and I was like, "Is he? Did he say tits or teeth?"
I yeah, I wondered if that because I thought the same thing, and it was like, I think he's saying teeth, and then it of course was, and I think it went back to, like, her not smiling at him when he first made that joke, and
Oh
her
yeah,
laughing
that's
her
good
laughing
catch.
at him, and it pissed him off so bad. And he emphasized that multiple times during the rape scene, and her pulling the teeth out, he was still very much like, "Fuck you, like, I'm not gonna take any orders from a woman," and she makes the comment he multiple times during the rape scene makes the comment about breaking the stallion,
Yeah,
because you got a lot of rides left, you gotta break it in, and she uses that back on him right before she uses those shears to cut his dick off. So once again, very poetic,
yeah,
and
all
I
yeah.
love how this movie does that.
So after that, Jennifer then visits Sheriff Storch's wife, posing as their daughter Chastity's new teacher. She then convinces the wife to allow her to take the daughter to the park, and after they leave, Sheriff Storch finds this out, realizing, oh shit, this bitch is still alive and has my fucking daughter. He then manages to track her down, but she quickly gets the jump on him, where she eventually knocks him unconscious, allowing her to tie him up so she can have her way with him. When he eventually wakes up, Jennifer then refers to the same comment that he said to her just before raping her about him being an ass man, which then brilliantly leads to her violently and repeatedly jamming his shotgun barrel in and out of his ass as deep as it will go, where she then reminds him that she was just as innocent as his own daughter.
Yeah.
She then attaches one end of a string to the trigger and the other end to the wrist of the still unconscious Matthew, who is now seated in front of Sheriff Storch. And once she has it all set up, she leaves the cabin, knowing that the gun will go off soon after. We then cut to Matthew waking up, where he immediately sees the tied up sheriff across from him, but when he tries to move, it triggers the shotgun, which fires around through the sheriff's ass and exits his mouth, and then hits Matthew in the chest, killing them both instantly. A little two bird with one stone action. As we then cut to Jennifer, who is calmly sitting outside on a branch when she suddenly hears the final gunshot, killing her last two attackers, completing her revenge. And that is the end of I Spit on Your Grave 2010.
That was very interesting too, with the tying the hand off to the Matthew, the mentally ill guy.
Who's been playing with this fucking rubber band thing on his wrist.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and her initial fate with him, them going there to get him laid, essentially lose his virginity. Her fate was put in the place of a mentally ill person who they very easily are able to manipulate and bully into doing this. And he eventually does, and he snaps and he chokes her and shit. And now this cop's fate is gonna be left up to
The same guy,
trying
yeah.
to convince a mental which she knows isn't gonna happen. She knows he's immediately going to react when he wakes up, and I thought that was just kind of like a slight connection there too.
All right, so differences. Surprisingly, there are a ton of differences between these two movies, more than I can really go over here. So I am just going to touch on all the big ones. This might be the most differences we've ever had in a remake versus original. A lot
Uh,
of stuff different here.
there is a lot of differences, but I also think that it paid respect and followed the original very well too.
I don't think that it didn't. It's just they changed or added a lot of stuff,
It
which will make sense. We'll talk about it as we go through them, but I think that it was a good thing. I don't want to get into the discussion quite yet. Let's go through this list, but I will agree. I think they did a good job paying homage to it, but
It
they
it's
changed a lot of
it
stuff.
it's the same story.
Yeah,
Like, it is the
it's the
same
bones.
same exact basis of the story, but they changed some of the little smaller, finer details, and, yeah, I thought it was kinda genius, man.
All right, so number one, right off the bat, we see Jennifer meets the whole gang at the gas station as soon as she gets into town, leading to her laughing at Johnny's terrible pickup lines, and this immediately sets the story in motion. One thing that I do like about the remake is it's paced way better. Way better. Like, you can tell this movie's written and directed by people who write and direct movies, and the first one is not. Because in my opinion, the pacing of the first one is not good.
Yeah, it definitely gets going faster.
I like this, switch up in pace better than I like when the pace they had in the original. So I like this. This is a good change. Number two, the setting of the story changes from Kent, Connecticut at a peaceful lake house to a small southern town in Louisiana with Jennifer renting a log cabin in the woods, which of course gives us the addition of the kind of dumb uh, redneck trope that we all know so well. We see kind of a different group here than we see in the first one. And as soon as I seen that it was gonna be Louisiana, this is kind of a complaint, is already knew what the bad guys were
The
gonna be
the
like.
the dumb Southerner, yeah.
Yes, yeah, and that is a negative change for me. I wasn't a fan of that. So number three, the story and characters are a lot more complex in the remake. I feel like we get a way better feel for the characters in the remake, not to mention the addition of the sheriff, the gas station owner is brought in, and the sheriff's family. So we get we get like drastically more depth in this
Well
story. There's
well
so much more story.
So I wanna say that the characters are more of characters. They each are more individualized. We do get a lot more character building in that aspect, but I do wanna say with the original, the characters are a lot more realistic. You really see outside of the rape scene early on in the movie, they're very much like a normal group of friends who live in a small town with nothing to fucking do. Like, I feel like their chemistry is really good when they're in the woods talking and joking. I thought their chemistry was really good, and I think that goes back to the original going with a very grimy, raw, realistic aesthetic, whereas the, remake went with a more
Shiny, new,
yeah,
plasticky feel, yeah.
yeah, it's
More cookie
it's
cutter horror
it's
kind of.
more heavily produced. Definitely, the characters are more of characters.
Yeah, I'm conflicted by this because I agree. I think that the characters in the original are more realistic, except in the rape scenes. One thing I don't like about the original is how just over the top these guys are. I mean, they're just ridiculous. They're like fucking apes. Like
Yeah.
it reminds me of something you'd see at the zoo.
Well, the actual sex part of it was pretty bad.
I think in the remake, the actual
I
sex part is more realistic.
definitely is. I agree with that, and I think that's just bad acting or maybe bad directing
Yeah.
because it was with everybody. But I like the characters more in the original for their realism. However, I do like in the remake, the character of Matthew is a lot more like somebody with a mental illness. Like, there's a mental illness of people who act just like this, whereas the original, the guy who played Matthew, his mental illness is kinda just very childlike, and it's the guy was just clearly not as good of an actor.
Well, one thing I do like about this before we move on is I do really enjoy the remake making the story more complex and more three-dimensional. We get more characters. There's kind of outside characters now. And one of my complaints with the original is, and this is kind of goes back to directing and editing too. I feel like there's huge chunks of that movie that feel kind of empty. It's like when if you walked into like a room and there's only like, it's like a big ass room, but there's only one chair. And it's like, okay, I see the thing that people sit on in here, but this room's way too big to have this little furniture.
I don't know, man.
It's kind of just feels
I
kind of empty
I
in a
can
lot of spots to me.
agree with that in the beginning because it does take a little bit to
Yeah, the
get
beginning
going.
drags.
But after, like, once the rape scene starts, from that point on, I didn't feel that way. I thought in the beginning it was kinda slow. It did take a minute to get up to speed. But yeah, I do love the addition of the sheriff. I thought that was a really good change. You wanna do something different from the original in making it your own movie. And the fact that they were gonna kill her and she knew that they were gonna kill her completely changes the way the 2 characters go after their revenge. And I love both of them. Like, I love the original because you gotta think in the original, had she known that they came back to kill her, she would have never had the plan to seduce them because she would have known that they intended on murdering
Yeah.
her. As far as she knew, she woke up, she was raped, she healed, she stayed at this place, she didn't waste time going to the cops because she figured it would be a
Pointless,
waste
yeah.
of time. But the fact that in the remake, she knows that they're out to kill her, she has to hide out, so she has to go about the kills in a much different way, and she uses strength as opposed to femininity to take her revenge.
Alright, so number 4, the assault isn't as, divided like in the original. In the 2010 version, you pretty much had the attack in the house and the attack in the woods, where in the original, you have 2 completely separate woods attack, and then you have the finale that happens in the living room. And while we are on the subject of the attack, we see that these guys like to record it on a handheld recorder, which is like this part kind of becomes part of the story. Not to mention, we see them watching her the night before. And I think it makes these bad guys seem a lot more experienced in this than in the 1978 version. The bad guys in the 1978 version kind of sound like what you were saying. They're just a bunch of bored dudes and they
It
just kinda come across this opportunity.
it's a
But
lot
these
more.
guys almost seem like they've done this a few times.
Yeah, it's a lot more realistic in the original. It's just you can tell they're not experienced. They don't have a written timeline for this. The remake is definitely even down to when she gives the description of who was assaulting her to the sheriff, he instantly knows who it is, and he knows that they obviously do this
Yeah,
on a regular
he's
basis.
done this with them.
Yeah, they're not even surprised when they walk in the house and he is now raping her or in the process of about to rape her. They don't have a discussion, there's no surprise moment. So these guys are clearly bad guys who've done this in the past, whereas in the original, it was a lot more realistic of what
4
a
fucking idiots, yeah.
yeah, 4 dudes who, decide to go attack this female because she's
Because of this
by herself.
opportunity that just appeared.
And they kinda show that by them riding past in the boat multiple times, and they see she's there, and she has already told Matthew she's there by herself. They have an easy way in through Matthew to get to her. So it plays out, and it does lead for a lot slower of a beginning, but it's a lot more realistic.
All right, so number 5, one of the biggest differences between the 2 stories, at least I think, is the addition of the corrupt sheriff, who it turns out is actually the worst one of them all. He's the leader like Johnny was in the original, and the sheriff, when he takes the lead as like the main bad guy, he kind of pushes Johnny in this group with everybody else. So Johnny doesn't become as important as he is in the original and the remake. He's kinda like a side dude, he's like a second in command kinda guy.
Yeah, yeah, and that's why they gave the sheriff like, Johnny in the original has a wife and kids, whereas the only one in the remake who has a wife and kids is the sheriff. He's the leader of these fucking assholes.
Yeah, and, one of the biggest effects that this has on the movie is the fact that in the first one, she just had to get away from these fucking dumbasses who were essentially just a bunch of losers in a small town, which is what allowed her to so easily like trick them. But with the addition of the sheriff in the remake, she's now dealing with the ultimate law enforcement figure in this area who has all these resources at his fingertips, and this forces her to get really smart and creative to beat them.
Yeah.
So it completely changes Jennifer's strategy than what we saw in the first one,
Yeah,
drastically.
yeah, that's what I was saying. The fact that the sheriff was smart enough to know that we have to kill her, and she knows this. Now she knows that the sheriff wants her dead. These guys are looking for her.
No point in going to any
She can't
cops.
be in public.
Yeah.
She can't go for help. Like she has to completely change her plan of getting revenge.
And number 6, we finally have her escape, where in the original, they just left her for dead or, kind of had Matthew go in and kill her. But we see in the remake that she has to actually escape because they are about to like blow her in half with a 12 gauge. And once she is forced into this corner of life and death, she has to think quick on her feet and make a move, not to mention she then has to hold her breath and basically be like fucking Aquaman and somehow swim like far as fuck to avoid them finding her. And finally, once she accomplishes that, she now has to manage to hide out in the woods, gather food for at least a month without them finding a single trace of her. It's
Yeah.
drastically different than the original.
Yeah, and I think that her jumping in the water wasn't as much as it, and you can really get this in the way that it was filmed. You'll understand if you watch it. I don't think it was an act of survival. I think it was an act of she is not going to allow them to be the ones to take her life. Like she is taking that choice out of their hands and putting it in her own. Like if she is going to die, it's going to be because of a decision that she made, not these fucking guys who just literally stripped her down and took everything away from her. And I think she just so happens to survive it and she's able to, obviously swim and live out in the woods and comes up with this idea of I'm gonna fucking kill these guys. They took everything away from me, and she goes at it with a much more violent vengeance. The original is super, super grindhouse, grimy, raw, and realistic, whereas the remake is very, like, studio horror, not quite as realistic, but the way it is stylized, they almost give a nod back to the original where they shoot it very grainy. Like, I don't know exactly how they shot it, like, which cameras and whatever the cinematographer did, he did it in a way that really paid homage to those grindhouse movies of the '70s.
All right, so it is time to put these things head to head in points. It is time for us to give our points and add them up. Find out who's the winner. All right, so I'm up first. Number one, tone and atmosphere. I gave the original 6. The tone is harsh, very brutal, and kind of straight to the point, which I think is great considering the subject matter. But I also think the atmosphere is a bit bland. To me, it's just lacking some stuff. And I think this is just because it was made by a guy who had absolutely no experience making movies and he just didn't know how to fill those gaps, giving it a more digestible feel. And I also think the absence of any kind of score is both a good and bad thing for this movie.
So I gave the original on tone and atmosphere an 8. I think the absence of score was absolutely genius, especially for the showing the rape scene. It relies much more on a more heavy audio and being able to hear it. It makes it a lot more realistic, a lot more uncomfortable. It makes your fucking skin crawl. I also liked the house on the lake better. We get a very good sense of how isolated she is. And also with the lake being back there, like they pass her multiple times with her out there in the hammock, like enjoying herself, writing her book. And you see as they kind of build this idea, as they see her out here by herself, they have the easy access. I feel like the original was done very grimy, raw, realistic. It has a real indie aesthetic, and I fucking love that. Like, as soon as it starts playing, The Last House on the Left, Texas Chainsaw Massacre is like that '70s grindhouse feel.
All right, so number two, characters and performances. I gave it a 3. Honestly, these are all, to me, very two-dimensional type characters. I do agree they're realistic, but this is a movie. Think Jennifer's great, but the 4 dudes just don't really have, they're very 2D, you know? They're kind of your standard small-town losers with, like, dead-end jobs. Jennifer does have more of a personality, but to me, like, I don't really even see her personality till at least halfway through the movie, but I just feel like the performances are a little weak for me. That doesn't mean I think they're bad, I just think they're a little weak.
Well, I gave them a 7. I thought they were fantastic. I loved the outside of Matthew. I didn't feel like the guy who did Matthew
I
did
think he
very
was
good.
bad.
Yeah, he was bad. But
The other 2 guys I feel like didn't really talk.
everybody else, I thought, they were very realistic. There was this guy who worked and had a family. He was in the Marines. They do mention that at one point. These other 2 guys, obviously a little younger than him, they look up to him. He's the only one with the job. They hang out at his job all the time. They're like his fucking cronies. They have a very, very realistic dialogue back and forth. And then Jennifer in this movie is a fucking goddess. Like, when she turns it on in the second half after the church scene and she really releases like her femininity and uses this to her advantage, especially in the scene where right before she cuts the dick off, she's gonna shoot him in the woods, and he literally blames it on her and uses the word bait. You were pretty much made yourself bait, and you see it in her face in the movie. She realizes that this is too easy of a death for him, and she allows him to take the gun and devises this plan to cut his dick off in the water. Like, Jennifer in the second half of this movie is fucking fantastic. She is a goddess.
All right, so number 3, direction and style. I gave it a 5. So most of that score is because of the style, but I do love that grimy grindhouse feel that this movie's drenched in, but I definitely see issues with the direction. So, like I said, man, some of it just feels kinda empty to me. Um, I mean, honestly, I think a lot of the problems that or at least that I'm seeing with it is I think a good editor to tighten it up could have definitely helped this movie. I think the editing is a little too loose.
Yeah, I don't think they had money for that.
I
Uh,
didn't hear anything about an editor, so
yeah, I gave them a 7. Like I said, the style being the very grindhouse, raw. I love that for direction, the realism in it. I love the her using her femininity to essentially kill these guys, the things that she used against or the things that they used against her to take her and rip her down, she used that very thing against her, and it shows, like, the power of women and femininity, and she's able to literally turn these guys into fucking idiots and lure them back in and kill them, and I love that. Thought it was great direction.
All right, number 4, impact on the genre. I gave this an 8. This is one of those movies that really moved the needle when it comes to what is acceptable in film. The fact that so many governments felt the need to enact this extreme censorship on such a low budget movie tells you a lot. And when it comes to hard hitting impact, I think movies like I Spit on Your Grave walked. So films like Deliverance and American Mary and fucking way down the line, like movies like Hostel, those torture revenge movies could run.
So, I also gave it a 8. I think it massively, like you said, it moved the needle, it started the conversation. People in horror praised it for its feminine power, but these idiot critics called it, like, glorifying, rape, which
Yeah,
was
yeah.
the complete fucking opposite, and it really started up that conversation, and the fact that this was still being talked about in the early and mid-2000s, and countries are changing their rules on it, and seeing it in a different light tells you everything you need to know about the massive impact that this movie had.
All right, number 5, kills and effects. I gave it a 6. The killer's badass, but not until like, the last 40 minutes or so. But with that being said, the kills are a little weak, at least like effects wise. I really felt that the Matthew kill was pretty good. It's like a really dark situation with him essentially, getting talked into this by his friends and then that gets him killed. I did really enjoy the Johnny getting his dick cut off. We don't get to see it very well, but I do give the film a bit of a pass here and bump it up about 1 point considering this was self-funded and I'm sure they didn't really have a budget for practical effects. Not to mention the guy had fucking no experience in making movies. So, I try not to hold what I would consider kind of the weaker effects in the movie against them as much as I normally would.
I gave him a 3. Despite the challenges, the movie still does not show us much. They obviously didn't have a great effects team to pay. They didn't have a
I
shit.
don't think I have one at all.
No, they did have
They did?
one, but it was 2 people, and they probably didn't have a lot of time, probably didn't have a lot of money to pay them. So I thought they did great for what they had. But with that said, I do think that, like, Johnny in the closet, that shot was
Yes.
fucking awesome.
Good.
The bathroom shot of her
Loved it.
cleaning the blood up after was great. The hanging scene,
The
felt
Johnny
that
and
was
Matthew,
done.
yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, I definitely do, wanna give it a couple points for that.
All right, and finally, number 6, the bonus, the impact of the rape scenes themselves. I gave this movie an 8. It's hard to watch, it's brutal. Every time you think it's over, they corner her again and it just continues. One thing I think really makes it hit so hard is the lack of score over the scene. It makes it feel realistic. It forces you to listen to every sound Jennifer is making, and it's really fucking sad and disgusting that this like happens to people every day. But yeah, my only complaint with it is I think the male actors are way too over the top with the way they're like thrusting into her. Just reminds me of like the Discovery Channel. But I love the lack of score in the attack scenes. I wasn't majorly a fan of it in the rest of the movie, but I gave it an 8, man. It's impactful.
So I gave it a 10. I don't think you could have gotten a more impactful rape scene. I mean, it's awful. It is fucking it is a very, very hard watch, especially your first time, because there's multiple times where you think that it's over. And it actually leads to one out of the both of the movies, the only jump scare that's really, really effective is when they get her in the
The phone,
house.
yeah.
Like she's been walking through the woods for probably an hour or two. She finally gets back to the house, collapses on the floor, and they've already gotten back to the house and hidden the house. And this is after 2 or 3 other rape scenes that's already happened. It just continues to go on. It's incredibly long, grueling. It's shot with a static camera, and so that makes it feel like you were in the room watching it. They designed it without any score or background music to really like emphasize the realism in that you were there. I do think the humping motions were a little fucking awful,
A little
but
awful. A lot of awful.
that did not change my opinion at all on the fact that it was extremely grueling.
All right, so on to the remake. Number 1, tone and atmosphere. I gave it a 7. It's not bad. It's kind of your typical early mid 2000s kind of tone. It's very brutal. It's very graphic, much like other films from around that same time, kind of around Hostel. And for some reason, a lot of those movies depict a regular person who goes through a horrible event and is suddenly capable of doing fucked up shit to other people. But it's very much, it's very much from that time, from that mid 2000s torture porn thing, which is not bad. It's just it's not very unique. So, yeah,
Yeah,
7.
I gave it a 7.
It's good.
It
It's just
I
kinda
will
coulda.
say that they did add some grain to it, and they did shoot, some examples are some of the cutaway shots, some of the very up close to the face shots. They did pay homage to the original. They did add the cinematographer added some static in there to make it feel like the more Grindhouse original. With that said, it's not done in a way that, say, Ty West would do it,
I
where
was just
it's
gonna say,
very, very intentional and obvious,
I would
like
love to see this done from Ty West, yeah.
yeah, yeah, that would be fantastic. I wish that they would have paid homage more, but I feel like in the time in 2009 with the very heavy studio involvement on these remakes, especially when they pay so much to use a title and make a movie, the production companies are very heavily into this, and that's probably honestly all they could get.
Yeah, yeah, I mean, I didn't let it knock them too hard. I understand, and it's not bad.
It's it
It's just
was
not
it
unique.
was the remake craze, and they were these studios were very much wanting the same looking and feeling movie as the last 14 remakes that came out the year before, and I think that they did what they could with that said.
All right, number 2, characters and performances. I gave it a 6. I felt that the characters are a lot more fleshed out than what we see in the original. We also get way more scenes in the remake with the group of like these, shithead rapists. And that makes them feel kind of more like people than the original did. My only issues with the characters is, you get your kind of standard racist, sexist, redneck southerner. We got a bunch of those. Also, the sheriff. So it feels like they tried to do the exact same thing that the 2003 Texas Chainsaw Massacre did. The local cop is not only in on it, but he's just as sick and twisted as the other bad guys. And I did enjoy the addition, like what that addition of the sheriff added to the story, and it made it more complex. But everything about the sheriff is like this, it's like a copy.
Yeah, well,
Eh,
he's no Arlie Army though.
no, but it's the same thing.
Yeah,
Exactly the same thing. The only thing we needed to find out was Johnny and the sheriff are, like, related,
yeah.
which could be. But yeah, I still gave it a 6, though.
I gave it a 7. Gave it the same as I gave the original. I actually feel the complete opposite of you when it comes to the making them feel more realistic. I think they are a lot less realistic. They are a lot more
I don't think
like
they're realistic. I think they're just fleshed out
I
more.
think that they're a lot more characters, like
Yes.
characters from a story.
Yeah.
They each have their own more individual personalities, and I don't knock it for that. I gave it the
Yeah, I
same as
like
I
that.
gave the original because of the way that they did the final kills and how she gets her revenge. She uses parts of what they did to her, parts of their personality in on these kills. These are very unrealistic setups that she has going on, whereas the original was a lot more realistic. And if you're going in that direction, I'm okay with a little bit more overwritten characters. So, yeah, 7.
Number three, direction and style. I gave it a 6. I honestly like the direction and style in this one. I thought the story was way tighter. It's cleaner than the original. But again, I feel like when it comes to style, they just, they did copy and paste some of the other big studio 2000s horror films at that time. It's not a knock on them at all. I get it. That's what was selling tickets at the time. But I don't really give them any points for it because they didn't really come up with the style, they just kinda borrowed it. So 6.
Yeah, I went with the 8 and kind of the same thing I was saying in with the tone and atmosphere. I like what they tried to do, what they were able to get in there to kinda pay homage to the original. As far as direction goes, I love that they kept the same exact story, but they were able to go with direction wise, it's completely different in the fact that after the rape scene, Jennifer is no longer seen in the remake. She now becomes the in the shadows. She is the hunter instead of the hunted. And that is a very, very different approach to whereas the original Jennifer is still the main character. She's still the main person that the camera is on. It's from her POV when they're driving by on the boat. So very, very different, but I also loved it because you took the same story and you were able to do that what seems like a slight change in direction, but ends up being such a big difference in outcome when it comes to the kills.
Alright, number 4, impact of the genre. I gave it a 3. I have never seen this movie. I haven't really heard, like, a lot about it. Maybe I was living under a rock, around this time, but from what I remember, this was just considered another mid-2000s remake it was fine. They just really took, the bones of the story and added a, lot cooler kills, kind of a bit of a torture porn style, and called it a day.
Yeah, I gave it a 5, and I kind of for impact, I always kinda judge movies as 5 being kind of a baseline. Nothing, and then, anything under 5 is just nobody hardly ever heard of it, down to a 1, whereas a 10 is, it changed the genre. And I don't think that this movie had a major impact when it came out, but I do think that after this movie, it really started changing the conversation when people looked at it compared to the original. It made people go back and see the original in a different light because things were a much different world when this came out. And it changed the conversation so much that the original director went back and made a direct sequel to the original. Like, for it to get the conversation going enough where the original director was able to go do a direct sequel, I at least give it a 5 based on that.
All right, number 5, kills and effects. I gave it a 7. The kills were really creative. They were also really satisfying, especially the shotgun dildo and dick sandwich. I thought this was probably the most creative that the whole the writers did for the whole entire movie. I imagine in my head that this was probably the only time the writer sat down and was like, "We got to put our heads together and think of some cool shit that has not already been done 100 times in the past 2 years." But yeah, they did use a little bit of CGI, of course, but thankfully, it was not all done on computers. I did spot some practical mixed
No,
in.
it was mostly practical,
Okay.
actually. There's actually some really cool pictures from Comic Cons, or Horror Cons where they have some of the props.
Well, good. Yeah, I've only got to see the movie one time, and I was taking notes for it, so I didn't get to look detailed like that. But yeah, the kills, in my opinion, is hands down the best part of the movie.
Yeah. Yeah, I gave, for effects a 8. I 100% think that this whole movie was based around having awesome effects and awesome ways that she kills them. Each one of them goes back to something they did to her or a part of their personality, and they're extremely gruesome, and they're mostly done in practical effects, which is a huge, huge nod to them in a time where almost everything was CGI'd. There is CGI in here,
Yeah, the
no doubt
birds
about
and the
it.
bird pecking the eye and all that, yeah.
Yeah, they do have some CGI, but they did use a ton of actual practical effects, like, when she picks his head up out of that acid water, when it's fully melted, like, that is an actual prop of a fucking, like, skeletal like, just flesh hanging off of his face. That looked absolutely incredible. The aftermath of the, voyeur guy after he gets his face fucking pecked off by these birds, like, that was a practical shot. There is so his eyelids being pinned up, like, that was done practically before the CGI birds ate his fucking eyes out. There is some really, really, really cool practical effects in this movie.
All right, and finally, number 6, the bonus impact of these sexual assault scenes. I gave this an 8. In many ways, this hit me a lot harder. And after thinking about it for a bit, I think it's because we see a lot more of a reaction from the remake Jennifer, especially the that part where she's like deep throating the gun, and then the sheriff like anal rape thing. Honestly, man, it was when they're doing that scene and the screen went black and we just cut to the sheriff pulling his pants up, I was actually happy about that. I didn't wanna watch any more of it. It's a rough one, and another important thing I realized, at least to me, I think the male actors did better acting that scene out. It was more realistic than the monkey fucking the other guys did. But yeah, I gave it an 8, man. I think that the reaction from Jennifer is really what spurs that from me.
Yeah, I gave this a 10 as well. Both the original and the remake are both 10s, in completely different ways. This, instead of relying on realism and no audio to make it feel like you were there, a static camera, like the original did, they did it completely different. It is a bit shorter, but it relies heavily on, like, really stylized camera work.
Yeah,
It has a really intense audio
it's
design.
shot way better.
Yeah, the cinematic, the lighting, they use a lot of, like, really dark lighting, and overall, it's a very, very darker rape scene than what the original is. The actual rape itself was a lot more realistic, and I feel like whereas the original, those guys were just trying to actually fuck this girl and somewhat torment her, a majority of the remake is torment.
Yeah.
They are trying to torment and torture.
All right. Well, it is time to add these points up and find out, is the original a classic or did the remake trash it? All right, you got it all added up?
Yeah, so our totals for the original is 43 and 36, so the original has a grand total of 79. And the remake, my 45 with your 37. So for the first time on the show, we have with 82 to 79, the remake takes the cake.
Wow, man. 82 to 79. So it looks like I scored the remake 1 point higher, 36 and 37. And you went 43 and 45.
It's 2 points higher,
Yep.
and here's what it came down to, because honestly, in looking at these 2 movies, they're very, very, very different movies. One is a pure horror movie, unrealistic horror, very, inspired by Saw, the Saw franchise with her
Yeah.
kills,
Mhm.
whereas the other is a lot more of a grindhouse, realistic movie. I think I like the original a little better, but it's hard to tell. They're very, very close. I like both movies a lot, but what really made the difference in the numbers for both of us looking at it is the effects. The original did not have a lot of effects, and the remake was literally a movie written around awesome effects.
Yeah, and a lot more money.
Like
Yeah.
awesome kills. Yeah, they had way more money to throw at effects. And what almost balanced that out enough was the impact on the genre, with the
Yeah, it was
original
huge.
having a lot more of an impact. Had I rated my remake impact as low as you did, we would have a tie.
Wow.
But I gave it a baseline 5 because, like I said, it did re-spark those conversations and make a lot of those critics go back and look at the original in a different light, and for that, I did give it that baseline 5. But had I like I said, had I gave it what you gave it, we'd be sitting here looking at a tie.
Which we
Uh,
have never really come up with, what would we do if that happened?
guess we'd have to decide together, which one we like better as a collective and not an individual.
We finally got a remake that won, but just barely.
Yeah.
After watching these movies back to back and doing the research on them, I gotta say, like, despite the remake to me being a better film, I respect the original so much more. The obstacles that almost derailed the project many times and, mixed with the determination that it took for a man with no film experience pulling this off is extremely impressive. Like, the dude had an idea, he turns it into a story, which then turns into a movie, which he then self-funds not just the filming, but the initial, distribution. He almost lost everything, and then for that tiny little low-budget horror movie to cause most of the world's governments to act fast is impressive. I don't know how much he ended up making off the movie, if he made anything, but he still walked away knowing he changed the film industry at least a little bit, which most filmmakers could only dream of. The remake is a better movie for many reasons, but the main one is because it had a studio behind it, not just one guy by himself dumping every fucking dollar he had. The remake didn't have to send shockwaves through the film industry and society and force us to better define what's acceptable on a big screen.
Yeah, well, and it's because it came out in a different time. We had these conversations were open. It wasn't completely crazy to put this in a movie as it was in the 70s. And I think that's why both movies really stack up for me personally, outside of all the outside noise. The rape scene is crucial to this movie on how well it's done, how it makes you hate these fucking characters, which makes the payoff so good, and it just makes you super uncomfortable, and it makes you think that this is a real thing, and these are real horrors of the world, and that is scarier than just about any other slasher or horror movie you can think of, is that these are real life things in the 70s that weren't being talked about. And somebody had the fucking balls to put it on film and do it as if you were in the room. And it's so uncomfortable.
With their own
And
money,
and
too.
the remake, I give them extreme credit because they went there but they didn't lowball it. They did it in a completely different way, the complete opposite as
But
far as
it's a good
cameras
way.
and yeah, and the audio and stuff,
Still
but
works.
they still were very gruesome. They still did things that they had to be kind of brave to do. Although times had changed, there was still parts of that, where he says, "I'm an ass man," and, like, literally, they show him, thrusting into her like, that's something that you still gotta be kinda brave to do, and both of these movies, that scene, which is crucial to both of them, they both I mean, I gave them both a 10. I thought they were both fantastic. So, it's very different with the core of the story being the
They
same,
both work.
yeah, and it's interesting. This is we talked about this happening. I think I like the original a little bit more as a movie overall, but on even my ratings, I rated the remake based off of how we rate the movies and the categories we give it. As a overall movie, it is a little bit rated higher,
Yeah, and
and
that's
then collectively that showed the same.
well, that's what this show is about. It's not what you think overall is better. We break things down into categories and add them up and see and really see. But the thing I want to give the most credit to, despite how good both movies are and what they accomplished, honestly, the core of both these films is the two actresses that managed to pull off both versions of Jennifer. Because honestly, both of them did a fantastic job. I don't know how you go to work, get naked in front of 40 people, and then pretend to be raped over and over again and still keep your sanity. So I think that they deserve a huge shout out. Camille Keaton and Sarah Butler, there's no way either one of these films would even be possible without their acting ability and dedication.
Yeah, and for Camille Keaton in the original, I love Sarah Butler, but I almost feel bad because after watching these and doing both of them in the same episode, I don't praise her enough. She did an amazing job. She did great, but Camille Keaton, not only is she a fucking bombshell, she has this feminine presence about her that really draws you in, and she's a beautiful woman, and to go through the whole rape scene process and everything, and then to film the end of the movie where you're using your sexuality and you're getting naked and you're doing it again all over. Yeah, props to her, man. I felt like, absolutely made the original.
Well, once again, we thank you guys for listening. We hope you enjoyed this episode, and please send us some ideas for the next remake versus original. We would love to hear what movies you want to see go head to head. Please give us a follow or like if you enjoy the show. Check out the website and check out the socials, and we will catch you next time.